First up on South Central, you just know the great Indian festive season is here when you see Mysuru all set for Dashera or Dasara as it's known in these parts. The grand Mysuru Dasara gets underway today with the spectacular Jambu Savari elephant parade within the Mysore Palace premises. The procession will feature 14 elephants and will be led by a jumbo named Abhimanyu. Remember, the Mysore Palace Dasara celebrations are a tradition that has been held since 1610, courtesy of the Wadiyars of Mysuru. It was first started by Raja Wadiyar the first that year and has continued ever since into becoming a tradition that is widely celebrated with pomp and show during Dashera every year in Mysuru. Right. In keeping with the spirit of revelry and festivity, data from the Confederation of Indian Alcoholic Beverage Companies, or CIABC, has revealed that South Indian states lead the way when it comes to buying Indian-made foreign liquor, or IMFL. The last fiscal saw the 5 South Indian states and Puducherry contribute to a whopping 58% of the total revenue from sales of IMFL across the country. That's 23.18 crore cases of alcohol bought and consumed by the region in FY25. Leading the South is Karnataka, accounting for 17% of all sales volumes in the fiscal. For context, the IMFL segment includes beverages like whiskey, vodka, rum, gin and brandy, and the term is used to distinguish these drinks from more traditional or country-made liquor. Right. Now, did you know that in March of 2014, not too long ago, the International Coffee Organization decided to commemorate the 1st of October as International Coffee Day? The intention behind commemorating the occasion was to promote the use of fair trade coffee and spread awareness over the art and livelihood of coffee growing. Over the years, the occasion has turned celebratory and finds continuing relevance right here in South India, a region that simply loves a good cup of coffee. So joining us now to discuss how coffee consumption patterns in South India are changing, I'm joined by Mohan Krishna, Executive Director at CCL Products India. Mohan, thanks so much for joining us firstly on South Central. And it doesn't quite take an analyst to tell you, Mohan, that any of us would tell you the same thing. But South India has always been known to love its filter coffee. But tell me, in 2025, how much of that is changing?
Yeah, thank you. On this World Coffee Day, firstly, we celebrate not just a beverage, but it's a journey from the farmers who nurture each bean to the communities that thrive on its trade and the joy it brings to millions every morning. Coffee is just not about a connection, it's about passion and sustainability. And at CCL Products India Limited, we remain committed to crafting quality coffee while supporting the people and the planet behind every cup.
Right. But, Mohan, I'm just curious. South India loves its filter coffee. Is that changing? Do you feel coffee consumption patterns in this region, in the 5 southern states, may be changing to more newer, modern blends, moving beyond filter coffee, Mohan?
There is a lot happening around coffee. A lot of evolution is happening around coffee. And yes, filter coffee predominantly takes the larger space for coffee drinkers in typical South Indian households. But now it's changing, like you rightly said. Uh, there is a lot of specialty coffee that is happening, and people are, having their preferences towards drinking specialty coffees and, exploring the other variants of coffee that is available.
Right, right. So what's the growth outlook like for the overall coffee market in South India, Mohan? What's that projected rate of growth given the fact that, yes, you have the traditional filter coffee, you have new age blends, you have patronage for both sides of the equation. What's this market all set to grow like right here in the
So
South?
for us as a brand, I would say that, we're a B2B company and now into a B2C transition that has happened for us. We're growing at around 40 to 50% in our brand, and we have some international acquisitions also that are there. So the coffee drinking uh, habits, I would say, have definitely changed in the last couple of years, and there is a growth in the way people are consuming the beverage, and there's definitely a scope to increase the consumption. India is predominantly a tea drinking country, but now coffee is, going to be a mainstream beverage as well.
Absolutely. In fact, in a tea drinking country like ours, the South, in fact, outstrips or beats the rest of the country when it comes to coffee drinking, accounting for a large chunk of patronage for this specific beverage. But
Yeah.
you speak about changing preferences and widening options that are available to folks who live here in the South. So I have to ask you, in the age of Instagram and content, do you see younger South Indians now leaning more towards cold brew, matcha, artisanal coffee, what have you, compared to the traditional morning filter coffee at home? Is this a young person thing that's actually going about changing the way coffee is consumed here in South India?
Definitely, yes, there are a lot of options available, and it being an aspirational beverage, people are wanting to experiment with different variants of coffee that is available. And yes, like you said, people are, being experimental while consuming different varieties of coffee, I would say. And in these types of coffees, like you mentioned, cold brews and matchas, they're definitely catching up in this new age market of coffee drinking.
Right. Long before cold brew and matcha came about, though, the instant coffee craze, took South India by storm. In fact, it had a lot of purists also, throw their hands up in rebellion. But the fact is that instant coffee has long been popular in this market, thanks largely to convenience. So, are you now seeing a shift? Yes, sure, cold brew, matcha for the younger coffee drinkers, but premium and specialty blends, is that something that you're also seeing growing, or do you feel options are more skewed towards convenience still being king? Is it a question of growing preferences and taste buds, or do you feel coffee drinkers in the South, gravitate more towards convenience? Is it a question of either or more?
I wouldn't say it's not just with South. I would say across India, there are preferences that are evolving, and these premium instant coffees that when we talk about specialty coffees and the cold brews, there is convenience that is created in the instant format as well. So we create those blends which have, cold brew blends which are instant, and the premium coffees which are used, and there are variants that are created in the instant format as well. So there is again convenience added to it.
All right. The fact remains that even as we speak, not just South, like you mentioned, but the country, but more so in the South, is also buzzing with artisanal brands like Blue Tokai, Third Wave Coffee, especially where I'm from in Chennai. These brands are taking form and shape at a rapid pace, far higher than before. And even as coffee majors like Starbucks also continue to keep expanding, in fact, 1,000 stores by the year 2028 is what we're last told. How does this change the competitive landscape for a manufacturer?
So the at-home consumption has always been growing. That will not change, though there is, availability in cafes and the stores that are around. The at-home consumption still, your first cup of coffee happens at home for most of the people. So the
Right.
consumption patterns are evolving and they're growing year on year. And we see, as a manufacturer, we see that there is potential for growth.
So, given that your first cup of coffee starts at home, Mohan, I can't quite help but ask you, what's your favorite coffee? What's the one go-to coffee that you swear by every single day?
So I drink instant, pure instant coffee. That's my first cup of coffee in the morning. And that is continental coffee that is made by us.
Absolutely. The convenience of instant coffee, I'm sure, knows no bounds. But I also have to ask you, in an already dominant South Indian market, what do you think the next big trend in coffee consumption will be? Do you see a gravitation towards a big trend by the young Gen Z audience of coffee drinkers, and what might that consumption trend be?
Like I said earlier, there are many formats of instant coffee that are now accessible by people, and like the drip bags, the pre-mixed coffees.
Yes.
Convenience has always been there. So I think the traction towards, having a quicker way of making coffee is going to, always be a major factor that one would consider to have a quick cup of coffee and then get going with their work.
All right, Mohan, on that note, I'd like to thank you for joining us and breaking down those insights and keeping us pace with all the trends developing in South India's coffee drinking space. Always a pleasure speaking to you right here on South Central.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know about you, but the fact remains that on International Coffee Day, I swear by my favorite cup of filter coffee. So while I take a breather and a little bit of a coffee break, you take a break too. But on the other side of South Central, we'll be back for more from this bulletin on everything South India. Keep watching etnow for more. Welcome back. You're watching South Central, your one-stop shop for everything making news from the 5 South Indian states. Now, moving on. A recent study by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has revealed that 32.2% of Kerala's adolescents may be pre-diabetic. For context, that's 1 out of every 3 children between the ages of 10 and 19 in the state, and that's over 3 times the national average of just 10.4%. In fact, the latest research by the Madras Diabetes Research Foundation and ICMR has now revealed that the diabetes epidemic may be a larger problem faced across South India, largely due to the dietary habits, stress, and the lack of physical activity. I sat down with Dr. V. Mohan and Dr. R.M. Anjana from the foundation to discuss some of these findings and why they matter to the South. Here's more from that conversation.
So the ICMR INDIAP study was carried out, of course, as a national study done in every state in India. The prevalence of diabetes and obesity, hypertension was published 2 years ago, and we released those findings. And you're quite right that South India actually had the highest prevalence. In fact, the highest prevalence came out in Kerala and Puducherry and Goa. These were the 3 states which had the highest prevalence, followed by Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, and then some of the northern states. So you're quite right that southern India had the highest prevalence. But this study which we presented today is an extension of that study. Having reported that the high prevalence of diabetes is there, we started looking at different components. And this particular study looked at the dietary profile of the whole country, and we looked at whether rice consumption was linked to diabetes or wheat consumption. As you know, in the south of India, we take all the southern states, it's predominantly rice eating. And there has been earlier work from our center also, which is, and our studies also, it's shown a direct link between rice and diabetes. We confirm that.
This is also largely in line with the recent Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation findings, which state that as far as Kerala is concerned, the number of, or the percentage of adolescents prone to pre-diabetes is alarmingly high when compared to the rest of the country, 32.2% when compared to the national average of 10.4%. Tamil Nadu not too far behind the national average, 9.6%, while the rest of the southern states follow. Is this worrying to an alarming extent, and why Kerala specifically, if you could help me understand and throw some insight?
Is it worrying? It's definitely worrying because, as we know, those with pre-diabetes tend to progress to diabetes. About 60% of Indians with pre-diabetes progress to diabetes. And as these are growing children in adolescent age groups, definitely as they become young adults in the next few years, most probably they would turn to have diabetes. So is it worrying? Yes. Why is it happening? There's a lot of controversy around that. Kerala, as we just heard, has a lot of diabetes. There are a number of reasons for that. Today we have some data on their dietary profile. There's a lot of saturated fat consumption in Kerala. Their oil consumption patterns are also quite high. There's also socio-economic divide. All of these come together and and that's increasing our risk for all of these metabolic diseases.
Absolutely. And Dr. Mohan, if I could quickly come back to you. I know for a fact that we're doing this discussion at a time when dietary habits are under the spotlight insofar as what's causing so many diabetes cases. What's the issue? I know for a fact that your study said Indians get a bulk of their calories from carbohydrates and fats to an extent. Is that the problem really, that Indians simply don't consume enough protein? And how prevalent is that in South India?
It's very prevalent, and it is true that one of the major drivers of the epidemic is actually the excess carbohydrate, and in South India it's definitely rice. 50% of our calories comes from rice. But it also points to a couple of deficiencies that we have in our diet. We don't have enough protein. So if you leave carbohydrate, the next highest consumption is in fat, which again has a lot of calories, as you know. And even if you look at the type of fat, there are good fats and there are bad fats. The good fats are the monounsaturated fats, which come from nuts, seeds, groundnut oil, and things like that. Fish, which has omega-3. So those are the good fats to have. The unhealthy fats are the saturated fats.
Right.
Your ghee or butter or coconut oil or palm oil, and these are all very high in saturated fats.
Right.
So we tend to eat more of the saturated fat, less of the monounsaturated fat, which are the healthy fats, too much of carbs, and less of protein. When you have less of protein, less of fiber also. So all the protective things we have less of, all the diabetogenic things we have too much of.
While we're on the topic of diet itself, I have to also ask you, Dr. Anjana, the fact remains that Indians love their sweets, more so in the south than ever before, and in comparison to the rest of the country. So all of that Mysore pak and the alwa and the jangris, is that contributing to South India's diabetes epidemic, so to speak?
Well, if you look at it, sugar consumption is high overall. So we have a recommended sugar limit of about 5% of calorie intake, and South India is way above all of that. A lot of India is part of it, but South India, particularly all the states, have very high sugar consumption. How much is it contributing? It's definitely a contributing factor because it has carb, it has sugar, it has fat, it has all of this mixed together. It's not a healthy part of your diet. So, but is it the largest contributor? Maybe not, because simply your white rice consumption is so large that tends to become the single most important contributor for things like obesity and diabetes.
Interesting insights there, no doubt, and it also helps bust a few myths with regard to diabetes and sugar. But Dr. Mohan, I have to ask you, we're having this discussion also a good half a decade after the FMCG boom became widely apparent, especially in rural India. A lot of discourse surrounding FMCG expansion often talks about both rural and urban, statistics with regard to expansions and business contributed by these two geographies, so to speak. The fact that during the COVID and immediate post-COVID years, you saw a lot of FMCG giants really expanding presence in rural India. Has that, in a sense, also contributed to unhealthy consumption patterns in these parts? And is that also reason to blame for the diabetes onset in these parts?
Absolutely, because most of the food products produced by these multinationals and other FMGs and others who have come in, it's processed foods, ultra-processed foods. And when you process the food, you lose that natural food that you otherwise consume. For example, any food which is consumed in natural form, whether it's fruits or vegetables and so on, which don't need cooking even. If you take it in its raw form, it is much, much healthier.
Right.
You take even vegetables. If you overcook it, you're going to lose all the vitamins and minerals and so on. But with respect to these foods which are being pushed to rural areas, your chips and all your other kind of processed kind of foods, they're very high in sugar, in salt, and in oil. All of them are not very good for diabetes or for heart health. And that is what is being pushed.
So, Dr. Anjana, I have to ask you then, what's the way forward? As diabetologists and, as key, proponents of this study that you've undertaken here, at the MDRF, what's the way forward? Is it purely a dietary overhaul? Are there other factors involved? Given the fact that South India, which usually has better health indicators when compared to the rest of the country, is well and truly at the heart of what is no doubt a worrying situation. What's the way forward really for these states?
So let me start with the diet, because that's what we've shown in this paper. What we're talking about is reducing just 5% of the carbohydrate intake with protein. So it's as simple as that.
Well, it's a simple hack, really. Just substitute 5% of all those carbs with protein, and you might just have the fix to get around the diabetic epidemic, so to speak, that's got South India in its throes. Remember, it's all about making those healthy choices. Well, on that health-conscious note, it's a wrap from all of us here on South Central. Thanks so much for tuning in. Keep watching etnow. We'll have more coming up on the other side of this bulletin. For the moment, it's goodbye from us.